Good evening, everyone. Welcome to MAM. I'm Laura Millen, the director, for 35 years, for a couple more months. And I'm really happy to be here with you. To start, I'd like to share with you our Declaration of Relationships, which has replaced our land acknowledgement previously. And we wrote this with our Indigenous advisors on the board of directors. And it's pretty different from the land acknowledgement. So let us know what you think. MAM is committed to representing contemporary Indigenous artistic expression faithfully and collaboratively. MAM recognizes the ongoing sovereignty of the Salish and Kalispé tribal people who agreed through treaty to live in peace with settlers of this land. Tribal people inspire MAM's efforts to create and maintain a beloved, inclusive community. MAM respects the original sacrifice made by Indigenous people. So, thank you. The show has been such an inspiration to us, and these artists are such an inspiration to us. And by way of just opening the evening with Dana, rather than introducing her in her early days, because she's going to tell you about that, I just want to say, again, what an inspiration this history has been to us. The fact that these three trailblazers, busted in here with the empty Carnegie Library and put up their own show before the museum even opened, showing what a beautiful space it would be for art, and also, asserting their voices and their authority, and setting a wonderful precedent for MAM of really centering and the work of women artists, which we have done throughout our history. We're finding so much inspiration with the history as we look back 50 years, and the community grassroots effort that started MAM was the Missoula Festival of the Arts. And it was an interdisciplinary festival and really rigorous. There was a committee for literature, film, theater, music, visual art, and the festival was like 2 weeks long, 10 days, 2 weeks long. It was amazing, and kind of really out of that, the first purchases that were made, they were prize awards from the visual art exhibit, became the first objects in our collection, and that included a Jenny DeWeese painting and a Walter Hook painting, and then pretty soon the idea of maybe using the empty Carnegie Library as a museum, took hold and really grew out of that festival. And folks who had been involved in that organizational effort became the board of directors for the Missoula Museum of the Arts Foundation. The county provided a mill levy from the start, and so there was also a county board of trustees governing the museum. But it really came from that grassroots effort, and all these women were involved, but principally Leela Audio, who really stuck it out and went to all those meetings and made sure it happened. And that's the way she was, and that's the way Nancy was, and that's the way Dana is. These are women, baby boomers, of course, who just followed their convictions. And we're not just, strong artists and strong art community members, but also activists in their own right, in their own field. And so when I came here and a few years into it, we were experiencing the first series, Culture Wars. That's when I really started to get to know Dana better, as we were in the trenches, fighting with Pat Williams to defend the National Endowment for the Arts and freedom of expression back in the early 80s. And so So they all have my admiration, and I think we just have a lot to thank them for. And I wanted to also acknowledge Dana's husband, Stan Reifel, who together with Dana was a great supporter of the MAM, both financially, but also as an advisor and friend. And so wanted to remember him tonight. And without further ado, help me welcome Dana Boussard. Is that too little high?
I'm sure. There we go. There we go. Thank you. You know, it's been a long time. A long time since that piece and since that time in my life. And what's interesting is when I started to reflect in terms of this show and in terms of talking, is this not?
Just move it over so
Okay.
because we're taping it, we want you to be recorded.
Okay. I'll try to stay here. In terms of doing the remembrance history, I had to kind of go back and think about a lot of different things that happened in my life from those days forward. And I realized there was a lot of help from my friends, like that old Beatles song, a lot of help. And so I could pinpoint people in my life who made a difference and who changed maybe just a little bit here, made me move a little bit that way, that all gave balance to where I am today. I grew up in Choteau, a small farming ranching community in Montana that was very conservative. But my mom was an artist. She really wanted to be a communist in Berkeley, but she only lasted 3 months there. My dad was the dentist there. He worked for the whole surrounding area, but on the side, he made jewelry. So that whole concept of art and being part of an art world just came fairly naturally to me. When I left high school, I went off to 3 different colleges, trying to figure out which one. A women's college in Indiana, the University of Chicago, the Art Institute in Chicago, and was having a really good time everywhere. My father got ill, but I had lots of background training in all kinds of things within art, because of course, what was I going to be? An art major. Nothing else but an art major from day one. So I came back here to be near my family and decided, since it was going to be a while, I would just enroll in the MFA program, which was the very first year the university did it, and get my MFA here. I had had so many courses before, so many, that it was sort of a situation where, here's your studio, go work, call us up in 2 years and you get a degree. I thought, well, hey, can't beat this one. So they gave me a studio, and it was with Nancy Erickson. Nancy also had made a decision to get an MFA. She had come from the sciences and was moving back over into the arts, and here we both were on the 4th floor of the Fine Arts Building. She brought her little baby Terrell in a basket, and the 2 of us plus Terrell had this studio together. So it was really the beginning of this incredible friendship that I had with a person who was just on the same wavelength that I was. We both wanted to make a difference. We both wanted to say something. We both were painters, for the most part. And we thought, we'd like to do something more. We'd like to just get out there. And this is where you kind of look at things like women's work. Because in reality, in those old days, they did have classes like shop and home ec in high school. Well, the boys always took shop, the women always took home ec. I never took either of those things, but in any event, I didn't know anything about welding. I didn't know anything about stonework. I didn't know anything about big sculptural things, and actually I'm fairly much of a two-dimensionalist anyway. The same with Nancy, but we wanted to do something a little bit more edgy. Now this was Vietnam War time. This is when things were really crazy, and people were going out wanting to be stepping into the fray. So the two of us, along with a variety of other people, started a program called GASP. And I don't know if anybody ever remembered hearing about that or not. Yes. Gals Against Smog and Pollution. And we went out to the Frenchtown pulp mill and we said, no more, no more. And we spent all of our time picketing and jumping up and down, which was great because Nancy had Terrell, and I think Laura said she found a picture somewhere, I've never seen it, of Nancy pushing her in a little go-kart around while we were picketing. So from day one, that's the kind of people we were. Nancy veered a little bit more toward nature and those kinds of ideas. I went a little bit more toward political satire or something to that effect. And so we both enjoyed talking about it and working through that while we were in our studio. Now, to then think about women's work, it's true. We really didn't know what we were doing in terms of three-dimensional things. But an easy way to do that was to get a sewing machine. So I got a sewing machine. She got a sewing machine. We found Leela. Leela got a sewing machine. And we all said, hey, we can do some really wild and crazy things, because it was sort of pop art kind of time in the culture. Right around that same time that we started building our own kind of personalities in fiber, and you can see that because our personalities are very different in how I approached it, how Nancy approached it, and how Leela approached it. By doing this, we began to expand that whole idea. And that idea actually was coming to fore in other places around the country. And I actually have there, which anybody is welcome to look at, my old catalog from this piece that was in New York, shown at the Museum of Contemporary Craft in 1971. And the sister here is all by herself, but there were two sisters. She and her other one were here, and that actually goes with the piece. However, way down the line, I had a big fire in our studio at home, up by Arlee, in my studio, and most of my pieces were burned. Actually, when Brandon said, we'd like to do this show, can you put together some pieces? The back of this piece is scorched. And it had been, for 50 years, rolled up in the back of my studio because I had tried to gather everything and put it together. And I had to pull it out and redo a good third of it to make it come back to life again. So don't go up and smell it because it's going to smell like smoke. Anyway, at this same period of time, while we were going crazy with our artwork, we were interacting with each other. The three of us were really good friends. The Cartwheel Gallery opened up on Front Street, and I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that was a very pivotal point. Dean Tavener and his wife, Patricia Tavener, who lived in Deer Lodge and were big ranchers, decided to come to Missoula and open up a big combination gallery, record store, and Dean was a philatelist, and he collected stamps. He was a numismatist. he collected coins, and he bought and resold all the time. He was really a sharp guy. And they hired a guy David Hunt was his name, to handle all the classical records. There was a whole entire room of just classical music, which was really kind of unheard of in Missoula. And then the next room was the gallery, and I was hired as the director of the gallery, whatever that meant, you know. So we all started showing, and I started showing with other people and having other people come in. But we kind of really recognized, and Leela was so good with this, that this was not enough. This was a really big, huge thing, but it was not enough. Missoula needed a museum. Missoula needed a place for us to show. And the three of us had actually gone to the university and said, look how wonderful we are. Look at this stuff we're making. Wouldn't you like to show us? And they said, I don't think so. I don't think we want to show you. And we were very irritated by that. And so consequently, we said, hey, we better kind of come up with some new things. And again, Leela was the spearhead for the whole thing. She kept saying, we need a museum. We need a place for us to show. We need a place for all sorts of other artists to show. And there were good artists back then, all over in the university. I mean, Rudy was running that whole department, and it was just wild and crazy, and lots of good things were happening. So she made a huge effort to do that. We went to see the mayor. We talked about it. She kept pounding and pounding and pounding, because I kind of decided to float a little bit out and start doing bigger pieces. As you can see, this isn't the biggest one I've ever done, but I actually started applying for some public art pieces. And the first one I ever did was in 1970 at the University of Oregon. It was a 27-foot piece that hung down in Memorial Union, and it was Mother Britannia sending her daughter off to the New World. And so from that, it got me into wanting to do that kind of thing. Nancy gravitated so much more toward the natural world and saving the world and being part of nature and the animals. And Leela pushed harder for that museum. So with the three of us, it was really exciting to say, I think we can maybe have a show in the old Carnegie building. And we did. And we tried to enlist other people, not for that show specifically, but to enlist other people in Missoula, other artists in Missoula, to say, come on, everybody, it's our time. It's our time to step up, because the world is really exciting at this point. There are lots of political things that are going on back and forth, and it's really important for Missoula, which was a very edgy place at that time for Montana, to really step up and make a name for ourselves. And so we did. So it was a good time. We loved it. And from that, all sorts of other things started happening with the city and with the library. And then eventually it started to be a museum. And then Rick Collier, who was crazy and a good friend of mine, came to be the director, and he put together a wonderful show, and he was actually very instrumental in getting me a commission in Boise for the city hall, and that was a 50-foot piece that I did. So I will always be indebted to Rick for my work, but also for the city of Missoula. He was a good start to this museum. I'd like to see if anybody has any questions, because I could talk about what my pieces are about and go on forever. Yes?
I would like to know the inspiration for this piece, and that it has a sister piece. So
Okay.
I'm just curious about it.
Okay. This piece was called The Rialto. And with every new morning dawns a new movie. With every morning dawns a new movie. And as I said, I'm sort of a political artist in a lot of ways. You don't always see it, but it's sort of scribbled down at the bottom, or it's going around the edge of something. And if you really look, there are things that you can think about and talk about, but you don't necessarily see it on the first go around. So we have kind of Mickey Mouse clown heads. We have the MGM lion. We have the movie concept. We have the two sisters, but only one is left because the other one is burned up, who sat on the side, and the United States of America in the middle, the big eagle. And this part up here and in here are pieces from vestments. Because at one point in time, I had a huge struggle with the Catholic Church. Huge struggle with the Catholic Church. And I can hardly believe I actually did these things. But there was a priest here. Some of you may know who I'm talking about, who was at Christ the King, who loved art, was a very artistic person, who asked me to make him vestments. So he gave me all the old vestments, and I cut them up and redid them and gave him vestments that he used while he did Mass. It did not go well with a lot of other people, but I did do that, and I did a huge banner. Where that is, I do not know. I think somebody took it and threw it away somewhere, but a huge banner that went in the back. And my former partner, Ben Sams, made a big crucifix on the outside of the building, and somebody came and bashed that in. And so the world got a little bit more conservative after that. But anyway, that was part of why this is mixing up the United States, the church, the spoof on movies, the sort of Mickey Mousey, where are we today and why are we doing what we do, right in the middle of a Vietnam War. So that's what this piece is kind of speaking about.
Dan, go on down and below the eagle and explain all that.
What about all this? Yeah. Well, the sides are part of the vestments, the green part. And this is sort of the ladder moving downward to the grass area where the two sisters would sit and wait for something to happen.
Do you have pictures of that?
I'm sorry, you have to.
Do you have pictures of what it looked like before?
Yes, I do. They're in this book, so you're welcome. In my only little book. But there are the two girls, and you can come up and see it later. There are the two girls sitting there on the sides. And that's actually how I met Stan, and thank you, Laura, for being so generous and acknowledging him. Because I needed a job, sort of, I guess, after I got my MFA. And after we got things going with the museum idea and showing together and being together, we each kind of went slightly separate ways. But I felt that I needed to have some kind of a job, and the only job that I thought that I was willing to do, because I was not willing to really actually work at anything else, was to be artist in the schools in Great Falls. So I did that for 2 years after I got my MFA, and I went over there, and over next to Great Falls High, they had a gas station, which they converted into an art studio. So it was such a wonderful program, you know. This kind of thing is what makes art so valuable for young people. Because here's the kids in high school, and all I was supposed to do was to come over, was to be in my studio making work, and then essentially mentoring anybody that came over and helping them with whatever they wanted to do. I brought 3 different artists from Portland and Seattle in at different times to do pieces in Great Falls with kids. But it was there that I made this piece. And then it was there that it got into this exhibition in New York at the Contemporary Art Museum. At the Craft Museum. And that's where Stan saw my work, because he was the director of a gallery there. And he wrote to me and he said, I don't know any artists from Montana, but you know, you want to have a piece in a show? And I said, sure, why not? And that started that whole thing. So I showed in New York quite a bit then. Nancy gravitated continually for nature, and she supported all kinds of wonderful organizations and animal rights. Leela kept pushing constantly to improve all the arts in Missoula. And even though we kind of had a little bit of a divergent thing, we were together as friends and compatriots and doing something within this women's work kind of fabric. Bye, baby. Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, you had a piece in the MAM auction show too. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it was really cool to see these pieces like next door to each other with like a 50-year span.
I know, it's pretty crazy, isn't it? You, what was that last thing you just said?
That's awesome.
Go you.
What?
Go you.
Go you. Go Dana.
Go Dana.
Well, go ahead.
Thank you.
I was just curious about like words.
Yes. Words are really important to have. I mean, I have words on this. To have people be able to kind of center in, that's my hope anyway, center in on my pieces and read just some little sketchy thing or a part of a thing or a piece of a poem or whatever it might be that kind of gives them a little bit of a way of uniting with it in their own special connection. I never wanted my pieces to be, this is what it is. If you don't like that, too bad for you. Or if you don't understand it the way I did it, then that's not right either. I want you to understand it in the way that you can and that you should. I mean, my pieces have really varied from these things, which I did for quite a number of years. I showed all over with these kinds of pieces. And then after I left New York with Stan, we came back here to Montana and went up there into that one-room log cabin and started building it into a house. And then I saw things from a slightly different angle. You know, I was on indigenous property. I was in the country. I was in nature, very different from being in a city and having that kind of an edge to everything. So I started making my pieces kind of flatten back out a little bit. So they started kind of moving back in until they became flat pieces again, which kind of centered back to that two-dimensional way that I had started thinking. Somebody has a question. Who is it?
How did it, like you take a big piece like this, I mean, was the idea already there and then you found fabric or did you find the material and it sort of morphed as you went along?
A kind of a combination. I have a huge studio. It's really big. It's got a lot of stuff in it. I had tons and tons of fabric, lots of everything there was to do anything with. And you find that you work, at least I do, work sort of according to the room you're in or the space you're in. For a while after New York, Stan and I went to San Francisco, and we lived in an apartment there because he was the curator and preparator for the American wing at the de Young Museum. So we were there about 2 years. And we were in a small space, so I really couldn't do this. So I made small pieces. So then when we came back here, I had 60 acres. I could do whatever I wanted to do. So for me, it's amassing a lot of material, having everything around you that you might possibly consider using, and then just starting in. I want to think, I mean, I did hear that Nancy had millions of sketchbooks that she was giving to the MAM, and one day after another of everything she drew, and I thought, darn, I never did that. I'm really hardly had any sketchbooks. I go back and try to look at them, and they sort of go a couple of things here and a couple of things there, and then it turns into something else that's not very interesting at all. Because I kind of just start throwing something down, and then start adding something, and then add another thing, and then if it doesn't work, we throw it away and start another one. But it is, I don't really have a total vision when I start. I have an idea of what I want to say, but not the vision of how to produce that. So that just comes as it goes.
Is there writing to the right and left of the ladder on the green, in the gold? Is that writing?
On this, yes, yes, and you can come over and you can read it. And you can decide what it means. Since I kind of can't remember all of it. And in fact, so many pieces that I have made and have lots of writing on it. My mother did poetry, and I have a real affinity for the concept of home and what it means to all of us. You know, what does home mean? Does it mean a mansion? Does it mean a regular house? Does it mean sleeping in your car? Does it mean a sleeping bag on the streets of LA? What is a home? And it's something that all of us have inside of us, is that desire and want for the right kind of home. Actually, speaking about that, this fall, coming up this fall at the library, Ariana and I will be putting up photographs that we did. Stan actually was the photographer, and it was called Like Mother, Like Daughter. And it was done in response to a big show called Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate that we were in. And it was about bigotry, hate, and white supremacy. And so the photographs will show along the way from her being a pure, white, dressed child, and I am the mother in black, taking the words from those hate books and starting to paint them on her face, and then moving down and painting her whole body with them and rendering her black in the pile of books. And that concept is, we want our home to be wonderful. We don't want it to be a place where our children learn things that they shouldn't. And all of us are born essentially pure. And what ends up happening with us at the end is the thing we need to try to obliterate in our lives. So that'll be coming up in the fall.
Dana, I'm a printmaker, and so the words are very important to me. And so in some work, it's not as inviting. When you use words, it's like an invitation. They're not didactic, but they stimulate you, like you said, figure it out, if you can figure it out.
Thank you, you're right, it is an invitation, it really is. So many of the pieces that I've done, people say, well, I can't read that, and I'm saying, excuse me, it's up to you to find out. Right. Go in there and figure it out. If you can't, it's okay too.
Hi. Would you talk just a little bit more about your collaboration?
Can you, I'm sorry, it's far back there. Can you talk a little louder?
Hi, your neighbor.
Hi, Michelle.
More about your collaboration with Stan, because I know that he helped promote your work and various things, but he was such an artist in his own right.
Totally. Of course, I'd like to elaborate on that for an hour or two, but I'll try to keep it down. I will certainly have to say, when you go back to the first concept of what I said in the beginning with a little help from your friends, I would not be where I am today without him. I absolutely would not. He was a soulmate. He helped me with everything, and because he was a designer himself, he understood what was important. He understood how to do things, and he put all my pieces together. I mean, I have big pieces like that one that was, I said, that was 50 feet long, and the ones in the airport in Anchorage, Alaska, that's 14 pieces that were 10 feet high each. And we flew up there. He stretched them, he framed them, he packed them, he shipped them. We got up there, he undid them, packed them, and installed every one of them. Those are things that I want to think that I could have done it, but I don't think so. I couldn't. I had to have help. And it wasn't just help. I had to have somebody who shared my vision, and I shared his. So, Michelle, you are right that Stan was a huge, massive part of my career. It was really a shared career in many, many ways. And he had his own furniture design business before I even met him. And he was excellent in that, and he loved doing it. But there was a time when it was really hard, and he had to say, I'm not going to do that anymore, and went off to do museums and gallery things. And then when we came to Montana, he said, you know, I'm done with that fancy wood. I'm going to just use barnwood, make our house out of barnwood, and I'm going to help you, and that's where we're going to go. And that's how it worked. So it was really good. Anybody else? Yes.
Dana, at what point did you segue into stained glass as a medium?
Oh, that's a good question. As I said, I was from Shoto. My dad was a dentist, and he was sort of the big guy in Shoto. People loved him. He was a terrific person, and he took care of everyone. And when he passed away, maybe a year or so later, my mother said, you know, I really want to do something for Charles. That was my dad's name. I really want to do something in the town for him. I want to have something that we can essentially dedicate to him. And she said, in the Catholic Church in Shoto, there were these sort of frosty, white, clear white windows. That's all they were. They were sort of frosty. And she said, how about we do stained glass windows in all of them? And I said, great idea. Having never done it, ever. I said, I can do that. Which is the only way you can actually do anything, is to say you can do it and then just go try to do it. So I said, okay, we'll do it. That's an interesting story too, because I did the creation, 7 days of creation, and there were 14 windows. So the windows on one side were the beginning of the world without water, and then the world with water, the beginning of the world without the stars, and then with the stars. So it went like that all the way up, and then ended up with Adam and Eve at the top in the sacristy. Well, again, some more problems. A lot of people in the church were really against anything that was not super duper liturgical. And so there was huge fights about it. And it was tough. It was very tough because I had gotten halfway through the project when people in the church were writing letters to the editor and saying, we can't have this kind of work there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, Father Batory was an art lover himself, and that's how it all came to be. He was the pastor there. And he said, nope, we're doing this one, and it's going to be good. And since my family was paying for the whole thing, they started to acquiesce. But then there were some other people that got upset and said, well, that's not fair. We should be having some for our family too. So we broke it back down, and people could buy a window for someone in their family. So some of these are some of the windows ended up being dedicated to other people in the parish. But they're there today. They're still there. And the piece that I did in 1971 in Oregon only went down 5 years ago. It was there all that time. They redid the whole place, so. Did you want to say something, Benta? Or were you just scratching your head? Okay. But I do have a lot of stories about doing pieces in this vein in other places because I've done a ton of public art pieces around the country. And some of them were in Washington State, and some of them went to schools. And there was some backlash occasionally, in some of the places with some school board people who said, you can't have this kind of piece in there, it's gotta go, it looks like phallic symbols, we don't like that. And there were all those kinds of things that happened. But over the most part, it's been okay. I haven't had too much negativity. Bob Homer, do you have a question?
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty kind of bizarre, isn't it? For me, anyway, to think back to those days of showing up in Missoula, Montana in 1966. Because it was 66 to 68, and I know you're all counting how old I am. From 66 to 68 was my MFA period. 68 to 69, I was the director of the Cartwheel, then I went over to Great Falls, and then I moved to New York. So I've been trying to think back on all those times and coming up with was that year, or was it this year? It's been a good ride, and it's still going. I'm not done yet.
Pretty incredible. Thank you, Dana.